Good morning.
Good morning. It's September 11th, 911, and
Yeah,
2022.
it's hard to forget that day, interestingly, and a day of great loss, and a day to remember and not to repeat.
Great service.
And yes, yes, indeed.
And so I'm going to begin this morning. Our talk is living a meaningful life. But I'm going to begin with a reading by our founder, Ernest Holmes. Ah, yes. Okay, we may have to say that all over again.
No, it's
We
okay.
just adjusted our volume. So I'm going to begin with a prayer by Ernest Holmes. And he says, and I'd like you to say to yourself if you relate to this: today I hold my thought steadfast in the realization that divine life is flowing through me. I believe in the fullness of the bounty of God. There can be no lack in spirit. Spirit now inspires me in everything I do, say, and think. Realizing that God is the animating essence of all life, that God holds nothing from me, I prepare myself for a life of joy, love, accomplishment, health, and well being. I permit myself to believe in the divine freedom that is my birthright. I know that the law of good keeps me in perfect activity, surrounds me with love, friendship, and causes me to experience the joy of living. It causes me to impart to everyone I meet an atmosphere of confidence and faith that uplifts and enlightens. Today I permit the flow of pure spirit to enter my consciousness, to radiate in my environment, to bless everything I touch, to make whole that which is weak, to turn fear into faith, and to accomplish the miracle of love. And so it is.
It's a
Yes.
strong message.
I think that's how we have a meaningful life.
And that is our topic for today: is a meaningful life. Did you have a quote you wanted to
Creating a
share?
life that matters,
Yeah,
actually.
right.
I have several. I have several. Um, so let's see, which one do I want to start with? This is from an unknown author. It says, at the end of life, what really matters is not what we bought, but what we built. Not what we got, but what we shared. Not our competence, but our character. And not our success, but our significance. Live a life that matters. Live a life of love. And I thought it was interesting that the prayer I just read by Ernest Holmes calls love a miracle of love. And I think we could do a whole talk about that because I think
We
love
sure
is what matters.
we
And
sure
it's
could.
interesting that it's called a miracle of love, the miracle of love.
Well, I think we call it a miracle because it is a mystery in how it works and in all the ways that it works that we often don't realize and don't think about. The An idea that came to me earlier in the day that I got excited about that I'm going to share today is that I was listening to a guru in India who was
Mm-hmm.
talking about the numbers of cells that we have in the body, and he said we have 3 trillion cells in the body. 3 trillion, not a couple hundred, but 3 trillion. And I got to thinking about that, and what occurred to me was each of us is a rock star. When I say a rock star, what I'd like you to think of yourself as a rock star, and I'd like you to think now that you're in a huge auditorium, and or not actually a stadium, a gigantic stadium, and the stadium is full. For me, I go back to one of the Prince concerts, and I'm seeing him look out at this incredible crowd. And this crowd is just excited and enthusiastic. And when he comes out on the stage, they can't wait to greet him. And they applaud, and he begins to sing. And when he begins to sing, they're all listening. They have his undivided attention. Now, what I want you to imagine is you're the rock star. You're walking out onto that stage, and you have 3 trillion cells listening to you. And the 3 trillion cells are listening to everything you say, everything that you do, every movement and every action that you take, and they're celebrating you, and they're never going to leave you alone, and you're never going to leave them alone. And so you are connected. And so I think one of the things that I've struggled with in my life from time to time is feeling alone. feeling abandoned, feeling isolated, feeling separated. And when I heard this, it was just another way of saying, we're never alone, not with 3 trillion cells. And then on top of having the 3 trillion cells, each of those cells has a history. It has DNA, it has experience, it has life, it has the past, it has its interpretation of the future and the present. And that's really an extraordinary to think the body of you is so much more than the body that you're looking at. And so I want to go one step further with it. And something else that he said that I was really impressed with and moved by was he said, the body that you have is the hardware, bones and skin and tissue and all of that. That's the hardware. And we fall in love with the hardware. In fact, we fall in love with each other's hardware.
It's like a computer hardware, right?
Yeah, it really is. And so since we love each other's hardware and fall in love with hardware and marry the hardware, what we don't see and we don't realize is that what animates and runs and keeps us alive is the software. And the most important thing about the software, which I would call consciousness, or I would call the soul, or I would call the greater you, or the source part of you, the greatest thing about that is that is bigger than the parts, bigger than the machine, bigger than anything else. And I look at my computer and I realize my computer, it's a 16-inch screen and it's got all the little things that it needs to have to do all the little, but the software takes gigabytes, not a couple of gigabytes to load. And all of that operates in the background to give us a seamless experience with whatever we're doing. So I'd like you to imagine that your software is an extraordinary cosmic software that's connected to all of the software in the universe, and that you are one with all of that. And the 3 trillion cells that you have are not only listening to you, but they're agreeing with you, they're understanding what you have to say, and they're willing to do whatever your thought process instructs them or supports them to do. So imagine when you say, I hate this life. What the 3 trillion cells say that are listening.
Or do.
Or do, wow. I guess it must be close to over. Maybe we need to shut down. Maybe we're done. Or what if you say, I just need one more day. In fact, I know I need more than a day. I am so excited about the future. I need time. I want time. I'm going to create time to have this magnificent life unfold for me. And what happens to the 3 trillion cells? Okay, let's do that.
Right.
We're excited. We can hardly wait. We know that when you fall in love and you're actually in the arms of love and the embrace of love at the consciousness level, we know that people that have lots and lots of pain don't seem to have any pain. When they're actually in that romantic state of love, they feel younger, they feel healthier. The 3 trillion cells are saying, the concert has begun. And the concert of love once begun is transforming. And that's what we want. We want to transform our lives, imagining that we're on the stage of creation. We're on the stage of the greatest performance ever done, and that 3 trillion cells are listening to us saying yes, yes, yes.
So one of the sayings that is very important in this material that Wayne Dyer is presenting from the other side is that our purpose is to love and serve others. And a suggested prayer that we might say is, how may I serve? God, how may I serve? Mm-hmm. And you may find when you say that prayer, how may I serve? The answer is from God, how may I serve you? In other words, how can I help you serve others? Course in Miracles says that all emotions are either love or fear. And also what that means, if you're not feeling fear, you are feeling love. You're loving life, you're loving others, and all forms of lying, cheating, stealing, all of those things we call bad or sins are coming from fear.
Yeah.
Fear that I don't have enough, I have to take what I need from someone else.
I'm not enough.
I'm not enough, I'm no good anyway. All of that is fear. And so what Ernest calls the miracle of love is that it makes all things beautiful and all things better. It is our natural state. When you think of babies coming into the world when they're not crying because they're hungry or uncomfortable, they are just in joy and smiling and giggling and laughing over everything new. And that is our natural state, to be in that state of love, just love and joy. So one of the things that I used to ask when I was really studying A Course in Miracles, because it talks about that's our purpose, is to love. And I thought, and serve. I thought, who can I serve? And the Course says this: serve whoever is in your face. Serve who shows up. It might be your children. It might be your neighbors. It might be your friends, your loved ones. It might be strangers. We have a person in our congregation, our group, who is a practitioner. Let's see, what does she call it? She calls it her, I don't know, she calls it her homeless ministry or her feed the poor ministry. But whenever anybody asks her for money for breakfast or food, she always gives it. That's her ministry. That's her serving. That's her loving. She also teaches our principles of how to manifest more good in your life, and which is part of our teaching, that you expect good and you affirm good and you visualize what you want and expect it. And so she has a whole ministry of ministering to the poor that way. So she serves who shows up.
She's such a good example. But imagine an acorn falls to the ground, and it's on the ground, and it begins to settle into the ground, and it says, not here. I can't grow here. I'd rather grow 25 or 30 feet from here. That would work for me, but not here. Or I only want to grow when the sun is shining, or I only want to grow when I'm around other acorns of like nature. You see, what's true is you grow where you're planted. That means you deal with whatever's in front of you as the opportunity that's afforded you to be of ministry, to be in ministry. And we're all in ministry, whether we mean to be or not. We minister to each other love and kindness. We minister to each other support and encouragement. Mm-hmm. When we were stuck in Utah, stuck meaning the car died in the middle of nowhere, and we thought, this is really nowhere. It was one of the most beautiful nowheres I've ever been. But there we are, standing next to
it was in a valley with a stream running through it and wildflowers.
Yeah,
mountains on both sides.
If the motor had actually continued to work, it would have been even.
We would have missed it.
Yeah, we would have missed it. But the beauty of so here we are in the middle of nowhere, planted in the middle of nowhere, in Utah, and a pickup truck drives by with a man in it, and he stops and says, "Do you need help?" And I didn't think there was any pickup trucks in Utah at all at that particular point, at least not on that road. He stopped. He picked up Judith, took Judith to a phone.
There were no cell phones in those days.
And they had a baby with him.
The olden days.
Right, and didn't he have a baby with him?
Yes, I didn't even know it.
And he had a baby with him. He stopped with who stops? But he did. And so here he served where he was. He served where we were. He served with what he saw. How many?
Well, and he not only took me to a payphone, which was miles away.
Yeah.
But then he brought me back.
And I was so grateful for that.
Because I called. What was the pickup service that we had?
AAA, whatever.
AAA.
Yeah.
We called AAA, and so then he drove me back. So he went way out of his way, and coming from, where did we live at the time? We must have lived in Florida, because
St. Pete.
Nobody does that in Florida.
No.
No.
we were driving in 1989, not so able Sable, yeah. And I call it the not so able Sable because by the time our journey had finished, we had gone through 3 transmissions. It was not able. And then when I took it to the dealer, they said, "Oh yes, we've had that problem for a long time." So you serve where you're planted.
Yeah.
If you're going to have to qualify where you can serve, you'll never be qualified to serve.
Exactly.
And so we qualify ourselves to serve, but when we serve ourselves. I happen to be watching again because, as many of you know, we lost our son a couple of weeks ago, and as a result of that, both of us have probably done more introspective thinking and more looking at the life after life, the life after death phenomena, because what we get from that is strength and encouragement and a knowing that there's an ongoingness. But one of the things that the video Life After Life...
And that the software survives.
The software, that's really critical, the software. I'd like to see more of the hardware, but the software survives. But one of the things that was said in this wonderful place that people go after they end their journey in the tunnel...
You're talking about some near-death experiences.
Yeah, near-death experiences. They go through this tunnel. They end up in what looks like a white chamber, a white room, and... What was said to one of them was, it isn't the big things you did that light up the universe. It's the small things. It's the smallest things that you do that stay with you.
Small acts of kindness.
Yes. The smallest act of kindness, the smallest thing that you've done. because it's spontaneous, because it isn't intended to get you something, it isn't intended to get somebody, it's what's needed at the time that you know how to do and you just do it. If we added up all of the many nice things we've said and done in our lives that we didn't know would ever be recorded, and notice that they were all recorded, we would have a tapestry of good. We would have a blanket we could wrap ourselves in of good. And wouldn't we all like that? And it's warm and comforting.
I want to read another quote because I know a lot of us think, well, how can I live a life that matters? That's what we're talking about. Matters how? Howard Washington Thurman said this: "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. And then go and do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive." So if you're wondering, how can I live a life that matters? Ask that. What is your passion? What brings you joy? Because when you do that, you'll do it with joy and love. And I'd like to mention some of those lives are often devalued by our society. For example, when I was a young mother and hardly leaving the house except to buy groceries and do household errands, I really felt like I wasn't doing anything significant. And what I now know is one of the most significant and important things a woman can do is to be a good mother. To be a good mother and make a good home for those children. I didn't really appreciate it because our society doesn't appreciate it, until I became a therapist. And I began to see, oh my gosh, good mothering is just the foundation of a happy life for that baby that becomes an adult. And there's nothing in the world more important than that. And so just because society that may not appreciate a role that you're doing, if you do it and you do it with love, and you're creating loving human beings in the process, that's one of the most significant things you can do. That is a life that matters. And I would venture to say anything that you do is a life that matters if you do it with love and kindness. So just think about, what is it that brings you joy? What do you love to do? And serve the ones who come to you, serve the ones in front of you, and that will be a life that matters.
I'd like to share a process I went through yesterday, because I think it's a metaphor for the process of doing good. I was watching with the Queen died, as you know, and when the Queen died, of course, there was a new king, and the new king. I watched quite a couple of hours of it on TV, and I thought, I should create something that speaks to that with my art, and so the first thing that occurred to me when I thought I should create something is, I don't know how. How many of us have wanted to do something good, and the first thing that comes to mind is, I don't know how. Now, the second thing was, I said, well, I can try anyway. So I began working on a piece of artwork, and it was miserable and awful and didn't work. And so I began working on another piece, and it was awful and it was worse than the first one, and it didn't work. And so, but what happens often when we move in the direction of service, there are breakdowns that tell us there's things we need to know and things we need to do, not that we shouldn't serve. So I went ahead and I continued to work, and then suddenly something happened. Not suddenly, after a while of laboring on this, something began to unfold, something began to happen, which is what happens when we start serving. Things start to line up, things start to fit. And so I created a couple of pieces of work, and I sent them to CBS Sunday Morning that they could use them if they wanted to on the morning. And I got an email saying they're using 3 of them today for CBS Sunday Morning. 3 of them, not 1, but 3. But what's true is, the first thing that I was met with when I decided that I wanted to be of service was, I probably can't, it won't work, I don't know how. And there were more obstacles to overcome than there was ease and comfort in serving. So one of the myths we have is, if I'm going to be of service, it should be easy because I'm doing something good. It isn't always easy, it's complicated, life is complicated. So the good that we're going to do may involve us in complicated problem solving that grows us and those we serve. Now, I don't know who will see it today. I don't know who will look at it. I don't know if they'll know it was mine. But you see, it doesn't make any difference. What makes a difference is the call to service was answered, was successful, and something happened that was meaningful for not just myself, but for the producer of the program and for a variety of other people. that's the gift you give. Now, I also use that metaphor because I created what I considered to be the best thing I could create. I sent it and I let it go. When I say I let it go, it wasn't until 11 o'clock last night that I found that they were going to use it. You let it go. You do your good. You do the service that you're here to do. And often it requires labor and intensity, and let it go.
So I have another thing I want to say to the women, which is that sometimes we think that when we serve others, that means we have to be a doormat. And so I would just like to make very clear
Good point.
that loving and serving others has nothing to do with self-sacrifice for yourself. You know, loving should not involve your being treated less than, or being taken advantage of, or being abused even with what's expected of you. So please be clear about that. It does not mean self-sacrifice.
Some of you know Jean Houston or have heard of Jean Houston, who's a very brilliant woman, well-spoken, well-read, and published a number of books, and is just an incredible human being. And she talks about growing up in a family where she met all kinds of extraordinary people. And the reason she got to meet them was because her parents didn't say, go to your room. They said, come out here and join. Her parents fed her the nourishment of the lives they were living. And that was so big and so important for her. It was transformative in her life because the life she's living now looks a lot like the life she was living when she was 4. That is, surrounded by the possibility of creating good and people that were creating good. She learned at a very early age that there was nothing that she couldn't do if she set her mind to it. And that's a job that a mother can teach her children that probably no one else on the planet can teach.
She met Teilhard de Chardin in New York City. He was the priest that had some very significant things to say that we often quote. I can't think of them right now, but one of the things that he named is the noosphere. It's called the knowledge, sphere of knowledge around the earth. He believed all the thoughts and knowledge of humankind created this noosphere. He had a lot of other brilliant things to say too. She also saw Ernest Holmes. Her parents took her to see Ernest Holmes speak at the hall that he spoke in Los Angeles. So she grew up with a lot of these ideas.
And I got to dance with her. She came to do a workshop, and whenever she did a workshop, she brought somebody with her that did nothing but music for her, brought all the music. And so all during the 2-day workshop, she would play pieces of music. It was maybe one day, I don't know. But he would play music all prearranged. She got to where we were, the church we were at, and her musician couldn't come. And so she said, is there anybody that would be willing to do music? And I said, I'd be more than glad to. And I played CDs all through her entire time. And all I could think when she would look up and I would look back at her, is we were dancing. And she said that later. She said, we danced well together. I could never have had that experience had it not.
And wasn't it wonderful that you got to serve her?
And I mean, I served in the background, and yet I served in the foreground. And a lot of times we think we're serving in the background and we're actually serving in the foreground. But the truth is, background or foreground, we're serving, and the service is what changes and transforms us.
So I'd like all of you to take a look at your own life and recognize ways in which you're serving others. Recognize ways in which you're loving. Loving your pets is a great service. Loving the earth is a great service. Doing what you can to minimize the changes that are taking place. There are lots of ways. What gets you excited? What brings you joy when you do it? Do more of that. Because when you do things that bring you joy, then you can enthusiastically embrace serving all of life.
Imagining that every time you do something of joy, you are a rock star, and 3 trillion stars are dancing with you and singing with you and celebrating with you.
I think I want to read that Arthur Ashe statement. That's a nice one to end with, because Arthur Ashe was a great tennis player. One of the first, I think the first Black American winning tennis player. He was fabulous. And he had this to say: I'm not driven by an obsession to scratch my name indelibly on the pages of history.
Which has happened.
Yeah, which happened anyway. The years pass and the world largely forgets the efforts of individuals. Yet those efforts are not in vain because they're forgotten. They may bear fruit in multiple ways, in a life helped here, in a single future brightened there. I could not forgive myself if I lived without purpose, without recognizing that the purest joy in life comes in trying to help others. So we wanted to talk about this for you to recognize the areas in which you are living a life that matters. Recognize it, do more of that, stay out of fear if you can, and anger, behind all anger there's fear. Behind all wars there's fear. Fear that we won't have enough resources. You have them, I want yours. So if we could just eliminate fear and know we have all that we need to meet our needs and the needs of others. And we have a lot of needs with the earth changes that are happening. But as people are recognizing them and working towards solutions, we can stay out of fear.
Absolutely.
So I would like to now do a screen share to show we're sharing music.
I'm looking for...
What are you looking for?
Make the screen smaller.
Oh, this screen's the whole
That's it.
screen.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Exit full screen. Exit full screen. That's it. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Now we can go to...
You do screen share, Bob.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It's supposed to be down here. We've got
That's it. Sure. Okay. Yes.
So, yes, we created our affirmation for abundance so that you can actually see it and read it and say it with us. And we'd like to invite you at this time to support our ministry and our center. We are the Center for Spiritual Living, CSL, Center for Spiritual Living, palmbeaches.org. And on that site, you'll find many things, including information about a new class we're teaching called In the Flow of Life, a book written by Eric Butterworth. We invite you to go to that website and see if you want to join us. It'll be a Zoom class. But right now, let's say our affirmation of prosperity that we say, because we know that as we give, we receive.
Imagine as you're reading this that 3 trillion cells in your body are listening to this and getting excited about the possibility of your life being more abundant.
Right, and who you support financially is also a way of serving good if you like what we teach. So let's say together this affirmation. My investment today is made with the full realization that God is the source of my supply and returns it to me enriched and multiplied. And so it is.
And we're going to stop sharing, and now we're going to end the recording.
Right. Keep taking us out of full screen. That's the only place.